Hello and welcome back to Getting Lost with myself, Gooder, and my good friend
Dan, who is trying to find his way around Lost.
trying to find his way. So we're on to episode 15, which is Homecoming,
Yep,
which is the return of Claire.
Return of Claire. And let's get this straight out the way. Baby is still there. Prediction was wrong. The baby is still there.
Still got the baby, but not a memory.
Got a baby, no memory. So prediction, boom. Still think it's got to be to do with the baby, the reason why Ethan's interested in her. But sadly, my first prediction, possibly, have I done any other predictions so far in this show? I don't know.
I don't think you've done any other predictions that are as strong as
the
baby is gone. I think we'll do some predictions. I think at the end of the season, and then we can keep a record of those and see how well those go.
Yeah.
But I think with this episode, for me, the main interest is the on island.
Yeah, like 100%. I like it's. Again, I think I've described a couple of other episodes this way. It seemed like a very weird episode. It's in terms of like my enjoyment of it. It held my interest throughout the whole of the episode. But looking back at it, I would definitely categorize this one as one of the weaker episodes, if not possibly, the weakest in terms of what we've actually got going on here. Because the flashback sequences was not interested whatsoever. Didn't really give me very much more in terms of the characterization than we already knew. And the actual on-island stuff, while was quite a bit more action-packed than a lot of other episodes, and thus held the interest. Again, you kind of felt that by the end of the episode, all that had happened is you'd just restarted. You'd gone back in time almost in terms of the progression.
Yeah, you've not answered anything.
You've not answered anything. You've actually removed Ethan from the equation. Because you've taken Claire's memory away, you've literally just restarted. And so you're back to where you were before you'd even introduced Ethan and Claire getting kidnapped, almost.
Yeah. I think the thing that surprises me, and it kind of more bleeds into the episodes after this, is in this episode you have them setting up like a perimeter, and like people go on watch because they know Ethan's out there, and Ethan kills like the random survivor.
Was it Scott or was it Steve?
Scott or Steve.
One of the two.
But like after this, they don't. That seems to get dropped. Like they don't. There's no sense that they have that anymore. It just seems very odd to me because you would think, particularly people like Saeed and Locke would probably think there's going to be more people out there than just Ethan.
Okay. Well, that's interesting to know because I don't know what comes up. And it would make sense that given they've kind of come up with this is our perimeter, the idea of keeping someone on watch seems like the sort of thing you do when you've got sort of boars, polar bears, possibly a bunch of evil islanders trying to kill you. So what they end up doing is, again, a little bit late in terms of how long it's taken them to consider, because you kind of think, well, having at least one person on watch during the night seems like a fairly sensible thing to have done, even if the island wasn't as dangerous as it quite clearly is.
The one thing I do like, though, is like initially, because you have Ethan kind of accosts Charlie like out alone, or after he's knocked out Jin, I think it is. And that sort of so sets it up for Charlie's not going to tell anybody and he's going to do something and cause some kind of drama. And that's such a route they could have easily gone down. But I think it's quite nice that they actually go down the route of, Charlie just immediately tells everybody instead of trying to be secretive about it.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Charlie immediately tells like the key people, and then there's a brief discussion where Locke is kind of advocating, let's not tell everyone, let's not panic people. And you're doing the face palm. This happens every time in Lost. Stop keeping secrets. But they actually turn around and go, no, we're going to tell everyone.
I can't remember that now. Was it because it's a conversation between Jack and Locke, and I can't remember who was on which side. I think maybe
So
Jack was Jack not saying let's not tell everybody.
No, it was specifically it was Locke, and the reason why there was actually a really ambiguous line said by Locke that I thought was quite interesting, because he specifically says, like, we don't want, I can't remember if it's don't want to frighten or we don't want to disturb the others. And I remember thinking, okay, so you could read that as like talking about the rest of the group, but you could also read that as because they've started to refer to whatever these are as the others. I thought it was quite an interesting, like, possible double meaning to the way Locke said it. But yeah, Jack was originally the advocate of telling everyone, unlike Jack, and it was Locke who was kind of trying to convince them, not aggressively, and he didn't sort of keep the position for very long.
Yeah.
But, was in favour of, oh no, he was effectively almost wanting to give in, because he didn't have a solution against Ethan, which he's clearly very scared of.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting. I think that's one of the strange things I think still about Ethan, is that he still seems to be super strong, almost.
Yes.
Particularly in the early encounter with Charlie, when he just really easily get Charlie up by the throat.
Yeah, and we had that in the previous previous encounter of Ethan, that he seemed like to have almost superhuman abilities, and he picks up Charlie literally with one hand, holding him against the tree. He had used a bowler throwing weapon thing, with alarming precision, and had mad ninja sort of Navy SEAL coming in from the sea skills on display. I found my note. So the line that Locke actually said was, "We don't want the others to get upset."
Yeah, right.
So that's why I sort of clocked that as, that's an interesting possible.
Which others does he mean?
Yeah. Is he sort of, I don't want to upset the whole group, or we don't want the others, like Ethan, to get upset?
Yeah. I think, though, after all of the setting out of like Ethan's ninja skills and super jungle craft and everything, the one surprising thing to me, though, is the fact that he clearly falls quite easily for Claire as bait.
Yeah.
And he doesn't seem prepared at all for more people than Charlie to show up.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I clocked that as well. That like you built him up in the course of basically 2 full episodes as this very scary, very competent, possibly inhuman force, but then gets rugby tackled by Jack this time and gets beaten up. And the only kind of rational explanation you can kind of go with it is just that he's so single-minded about getting Claire that when Claire is put out, and he sort of just goes for her without engaging his skills or his other ability side of it. But yeah, it was difficult to quite reconcile, because of having this build-up and then he just goes down very easily, completely fooled by the 5 people who are hiding not very far away from Claire. Yeah, and I think that's possibly, it feeds into why I probably describe it as a fairly weak episode. Just, it kind of felt like lazy writing in a lot of areas. I'm never a big fan of the memory loss device as a writing mechanic anyway. It's always sort of, oh, well, that's convenient. So that means we don't get to find anything about, what's happened to Claire, but we get Claire back. Great. And it's even sort of commented on in the episode. They sort of lampshade it, don't they? Where they like, oh, well, how many cases of random amnesia have you ever come across? Well, not very many, but, it could happen.
Yeah. And I think the other side of it as well is, the flashbacks don't add anything.
No. I mean, they fill in a gap for Charlie's history, but they just add nothing that you haven't already seen. I mean, all it really does is put a comparison to what he's doing with Claire now, like when he's trying to get over the drugs, trying to do the right thing and be back to that character that he had before. And we're just kind of seeing it just in a slightly different lens. We're not really gaining anything of it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that doesn't help it for me is, well, 2 things, I guess, is the the girl and the father that he kind of cons or starts by conning and then supposedly starts falling for. Like she's so stereotyped posh English girl. There's nothing to her, and that relationship, from the kind of timeline in the flashbacks, appears to develop over a course of about a week or something.
Yeah, I mean, there was maybe a hint that it might have been a little bit longer, because I think the first time through, it was like, is this just literally over a weekend? And then there was like some hint that his drug buddy had been sort of giving him drugs for a little bit longer than that. But it was still like maybe 2 weeks at most that the whole thing took place, because there was just not enough interactions for it to be any real longer than that.
It just seems like they see her in the bar, then after that, they appears that they're coming back to her house from like a first date or an early date. Then that skips straight to, oh, meet my father. Then basically he's kind of having that conversation with the father where like, oh, the band is over.
Yep.
Then after that, it's straight to, oh, he's been offered a job by the father.
She's starting on Monday, and
then she's buying him like suits and cases and yeah. So that for me, just like I couldn't buy into it at all because it all just seemed too conveniently quick. And then at the end, she's supposed to be really upset that he's lied to her. But like, I'm kind of sat there thinking, but you've only known him like a couple of weeks or something.
And you know, it is a problem in that you've got at most 10 or 15 minutes worth of screen time to do the flashback stuff. But it's just an example of you've created a writing problem for yourself in that these following things must happen, but we're limited by what we've already done. So he's a drug addict, so we can't have him going too long without the drugs. And then you've got, you know, he needs to have the impetus to actually steal from her in order to get the drugs, which can't occur over an extended length of time because he can't be without the drugs for a very long period of time. So it's kind of like, well, it's bad writing because we've kind of written ourselves into this corner that we need to come up with something plausible. But it does mean that you just have no investment in, is it Lucy? Was that her name?
I can't remember. Actually,
I think it was Lucy.
Posh,
as a character. Because you have no investment in her, you have no investment in Charlie sort of being disappointed in himself for failing her. You much more care about what he's been doing on the island with Claire, which is basically the same storyline.
Yeah. Because I think the one way that occurs to me that they could have made it work better is if you'd set it up so that instead of that being like somebody he's freshly met, it was perhaps somebody that he'd known already.
Yeah, an old friend.
Or something like an old friend that he then, you know, makes think something is happening or, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I really thought how I would do it. But yeah, it makes sense that if he'd come across someone that he knew from his church-going days, who knew him as the previous Charlie and not the drug-addicted Charlie, and then you could see him basically trying to reclaim that life in that guise, and that would have made it probably a bit more interesting than what it was. As it was, he steals was it Winston Churchill's cigar case or something?
And that was the other thing. Is like, of all the things in that house you could steal, the very worst thing you could steal would be the thing that's prominently on display in one of the rooms, like because people are going to notice that.
Yeah, and I don't know about exactly how you pawn stolen goods, but I'm pretty sure that pawning stolen goods is harder when it's a really unique item that there's only one of these. I can't think where this could have come from.
So yeah, it is a weird episode because that the flashback thing just no interest for me in those flashbacks. And then the island stuff, like you say, it's kind of got a bit more action in it, but it doesn't really develop a lot of things.
No, I mean, it's got there's some nice bits, so you get some little hints like throughout the episode of stuff. But in terms of how the overall plot line moves anything forward, if anything, it moves everything a step back. I mean, things that I thought of when watching it. One of the interesting things was it had a previously on Lost catch up. This one, some of them do, and it did make it showed you basically Ethan threatening Jack, like don't stop following me or I'll kill one of the two. And that did make me think of something there in that I can't remember what episode it was, but which I probably missed the first time round, was it made me ask the questions like, well, why are you threatening to kill one of the two people you've kidnapped as opposed to just threatening to kill the person who's following you? And it was almost like, oh, thinking about it, he's deliberately not threatening and not just killing off Jack. And I wondered if if there's a motivation there going on in terms of who he's been selective in terms of defeating, essentially. Because if there's a guy following you who you don't want to follow, you could threaten to kill someone else, or you could just kill him in terms of solving the problem. And he deliberately doesn't do that. So that was just something that crossed my mind in the previously on, which kind of added a little bit more to the mystery of Ethan. But of course, by the end of the episode, we've removed the mystery of Ethan because we killed Ethan.
Yeah, Ethan's dead. I suppose, yeah, we still have the mystery of where Ethan has come from.
Yeah.
And why Ethan seems to be almost like a horror villain.
Yeah.
Powered character.
And you got a few nice little touches. Like you got when Ethan reappears, he has these 4, what you assume are Claire's fingernail marks on his cheek. So you kind of go, okay, so there clearly has been something that's allowed Claire to escape. And that sort of talked about, because there's a scene where Syed and Charlie and Jack, I think it is, are talking about how Syed's a bit suspicious of Claire because he's like, well, we've seen Ethan, what he's been up to. There's no basic way that pregnant woman is going to have been able to escape. But then when you actually do see him, it seems to be some evidence that you're assuming it's Claire has injured him and allowed herself to escape. So it adds some interesting sort of intrigue into what's gone on there and how has Claire got away. Only to be undermined by him being killed, but yeah.
and I mean, to be fair, you can kind of agree with. I think it's actually in the. Don't know if it's the end of this episode or actually in the next episode, where Jack's like, "Oh, I think it's Jack. He's like, you killed him. We could have found out this stuff." And then Charlie's like, "Do you really think he would have told us anything anyway?"
Yeah, no, it's one of those where you can definitely see a motivation behind Charlie picking up the gun and killing him. It's just purely that it's awfully convenient how it pans out. It wasn't like Charlie had a gun in the first place. Jack has to drop the gun. Somehow Charlie has to be in the same place as the ambush, also undetected by not just Ethan, but also the 5 people who are ambushing them. He manages to get to the gun before anyone else. No one else sees him while he's doing that. And then he gets the opportunity to put 5 rounds into him. So yeah, it's one of those where it just felt like very convenient writing, where it was like, well, we're introducing this big bad. We kind of want him out the way for a bit. So we're just going to kill him off, reset Claire's memory, not tell the audience anything.
I think the only other real note I did make about it was rewatching it. It's quite interesting. Well, I thought it was interesting that a lot of the episode is really darkly lit this time around.
Yep.
Which does help add to that kind of, I guess, foreboding kind of mood of the hunt.
I mean, it was definitely designed to sort of feel a bit like, I don't know, Predator or a horror movie or something like that with the Ethan character, because the final bit takes place in the rain, which is a classic sort of trope in order to do these bits and pieces. I mean, what else did in this episode? Things that I thought were interesting. There was a nice little bit with Jin and Sun.
Oh yeah, I did make a note about that. I think that's interesting, that little bit, because
they have a conversation where you can definitely view it as Jin possibly beginning to suspect or suggestingly suspecting that Sun can understand what's going on, because he asks about what's going on, and then he asks specifically, what about the baby? And the only way she could have any knowledge of the baby is by understanding what's going on. And it seemed like a very deliberate question on his part.
Yes, yeah. I was going to say, that's the note I made as well. Like, yeah, it very much gives that impression that he's kind of almost testing, because he's starting to suspect that maybe he doesn't quite get that she understands English, but he does seem to be starting to catch on that she knows
Yeah, she's communicating
about stuff that's going on.
Yeah, whether or not it's her being able to understand English, someone in the group being somehow communicating with her, or her just being more in the loop than he is. There's definitely something there that. Yeah, I noted it down. So, that's an interesting little interaction that they've thrown in there. They didn't need to be there, but was clearly adding to almost the sort of divide between those two characters that's going on as Sun is becoming more interlinked to the rest of the group. Jin is becoming less so, and even less so from Sun as well.
Oh no, I will fully hold my hand up and admit that I did laugh when Charlie approaches Jin, and he goes Annyeong, because he's learnt Korean for hello, but it just makes me think of Arrested Development. Where everybody thinks the adopted Korean boy is called Annyeong because that's what he says.
Yeah, I don't think I had much else on this episode. I spotted that there was a potential Office reference, because there was a mention of a paper company being bought up in Slough, which I thought might have been a reference to.
Oh, right, yeah.
The copier that Charlie was selling had the same number as the flight. It was a C815 copier.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, you're starting to pick up on numbers. Yeah.
So I was like, okay, there we go. But yeah, other than that, the only thing I also noted down was yet again further Boone incompetence.
Okay, the note on that was I wrote down Boone is like Locke's puppy. There's like a scene fairly early on where Boone's like, oh, "What's happening? What should we do, Locke?" And Locke's just like looks just irritated by him.
Well, there was that one, and then later on when it's like,
and then later on, Boone's like,
"Oh, I can take a shift,"
and everybody's like, "Oh, bless him," like patting him on the head. And then, of course, he has the bit where, like, the trap goes off, and it's the dog.
Yeah, and it's sort of implied that he's fallen asleep on guard duty again, and the trap goes off, and he gets licked by the dog. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I had on that one.
Yep, no, me too.
Bit of a tread water episode, really.
Bit of a tread water, step backwards, removed a bit of, well, I guess what it's done in terms of the grand scheme of things is it's removed the one face we know about whether or not the others or the group on the island that we're not aware of. That I think the assumption is there's more than just Ethan. And now we don't know anything about them, because at least previously we had a face, I guess, that was associated with them.
So that was episode 15, Homecoming.
Yep.
Feel free to let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Prove to us that somebody is listening. Come on. And join us next time for Outlaws in the Outback, I guess. Well, not really the Outback. Outlaws in Oz.
Outlaws in Oz, yep. It's going to be a Sawyer-based episode. And everyone likes Sawyer.
Yay! Yeah, thank you. We'll see you next time.